Hi everyone, and welcome to UNHCR Innovation Hangout with Worldreader. I'm Jackie Strecker, the manager of the Learn Lab at UNHCR Innovation, and I'll be your moderator today. Now, as we talked about last week, innovation isn't just a buzzword, but it's imperative when we think about the humanitarian setting, and especially when we look at expanding and extending educational access for refugees and displaced communities. So we really want to look at the role that innovation can play, not just thinking about technology, but thinking about how we can really put into place systems and processes to foster innovative solutions. So today we're going to be talking about innovating in education through the use of e-reader programs. It's really important to stress the word of programs here, because as I said before, we're not just looking at the technology itself, but we're looking at the entire system behind the use of e-readers. So last year we had the pleasure of teaming up with Worldreader, and we were really trying to look at a way that we could foster a culture of reading within refugee camps and within refugee settlements, while also saying how we could use low cost-effective solutions to bring in a variety of digital books and resources for them to use in the school and really to engage with, so they gain other perspectives from around the world. So today we're going to be talking about this program, about their successes, their challenges, and opportunities for the future. And before I introduce the panelists today, I just want to start by saying we apologize for the delay in the start time. We're really excited to engaging with all of you in the audience to hear more about what you think around these programs and any questions that you have. So if you do have questions, please tweet those questions using the hashtag eLearning, or you can use the Q&A tool on the Hangout page, and we'll make sure that if we see the hashtag, we'll respond to your questions. So with us today, we've got from Worldreader, Joan and Martin, who are based in Nairobi, Kenya, and have been instrumental to running the program throughout East Africa, and have been with us and on the ground in Mapenda and Kitamo, where we've actually been running this pilot. Hi everyone, sorry about that. I think there was an audio problem there. We apologize for the delay, and we're going to get started right away. We are really excited that we've got Worldreader here with us, who are going to be discussing opportunities around how we can innovate through the use of e-readers to build a culture of reading and look at cost-effective opportunities for books and getting educational resources to refugees. So we've got the team from Kenya here, from Worldreader, Joanne and Martin. And we've also got a variety of UNHCR colleagues, and Tina Tam, who's their Senior Director of Institutional Operations. And so we're going to jump right into the questions. But again, just to say, if you do have any questions that you would like to table to the group, if you could make sure that you tweet using the hashtag eLearning or through the Q&A tool, and then we'll make sure that we reach out to you right away and respond to those questions throughout the panel. So I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to go first both to Joanne and to Tina to ask, coming off of the World Education Forum, we saw many different conversations around the importance of innovations to really improve educational outcomes. And why do you think e-readers can be one possible tool that we can use to help expand educational opportunities?
Thank you, Jackie, and hello, everyone. This is Tina Tam from Worldreader, and thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to start by saying something that all of us already know very well is like, of course, we all already know education is transformative, that it increases earning potential, improves health outcomes, and decreases inequality. And books are, of course, necessary for education and the development of these skills. And still, many students and communities have little or access to no books. So Worldreader approaches by looking at not only the technology or the e-reader first, but we started out by looking at it as, what is kind of the ecosystem that could make this work. So first, we know that technology is increasingly ubiquitous, and the cost is also diminishing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and probably more importantly, we also know that the books have to be relevant. They have to be relatable, have to be the right levels for students and teachers, and have themes that they can relate to and enjoy. So providing relevant content is a key. And then third and finally, introducing technology to, if we think that technology could play a key role, introducing technology in classrooms or libraries, it's not just something that you do. You don't just add technology. There's a lot around it. So we also looked very closely at on the implementation side, and by doing field work and learning through implementation and partnerships. So to sum up, there's technology and the diminishing cost, and the second thing is relevant content, and then third, the field work and implementation. So then we basically tested different types of technologies, and then we also started building a library of digital books that are relevant to these schools, both curriculum content and storybooks. And now we have a digital library of 20,000 books in 48 languages. We've tested the e-readers for about 5 years now, and know that because it's only for reading, it can store a lot of content, and it also has the power lasts a long time. One charge can last you 3 to 4 weeks of reading. So we did all of that, and then we kind of built this ecosystem to make sure that digital books actually could make an impact in terms of learning outcomes. So now, if we could show that the slide, I have a reference slide for everyone, both for right now and also later on as a reference. We've also, throughout these years, we've also started doing a lot of research projects and see whether research could improve impact. And so later on, I welcome you all to go on the worldreader.org site. There's a learning section where we've published a lot of reports on whether digital reading actually works. And so, for example, we've done a study on in 8 libraries in Kenya, and we found that monthly library patronage increased 178% over 8 months of the e-reading program. And that's very relevant to many different types of communities throughout sub-Saharan Africa. In the refugee setting, also very relevant in community hubs and everything. We've also done studies in classrooms. This study came out of Ghana, where we produced a final report in 2014, and we found that the students, and this one we used reading assessments to actually test reading comprehension and oral reading fluency. We found that students more than doubled their scores in reading comprehension, and in oral reading fluency, students improved nearly 2 times compared to control students in their native language tree. And then finally, we also, in addition to the e-reader, we also have an application available on mobile phones. That's also very relevant for communities, especially community members that are not necessarily in schools. They can use their mobile phones to access a lot of reading materials. And we, partnering with UNESCO, and we have published a report called Reading in the Mobile Era in 2014, and we have found that there was a large impact on reading engagement. In particular, men read 30 more minutes per month on mobile phones, and women's engagement's even higher, even though there are fewer women who have access to phones. But when they do get on the application, have the opportunity to get on the application, they read 200 plus minutes per month. So yes, so to summarize, we built this ecosystem, the digital library, and did a lot of testing and research to actually find out that e-reading really does make a difference in terms of learning outcomes. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Tina. And I think you've done a great job of capturing, Worldreader's approach to having a strong evidence base, being able to test out a variety of different tools and technologies, and start to see what the possibilities are for expansion. And this was part of the reason why we were so excited to be able to partner with Worldreader to bring this program into a refugee context to see what the results would be. So I want to turn it over to Joanne now. We'll get a little bit later, we'll touch on some of the promising initial results that we've seen within Tanzania for e-reading programs. But I wanted to get a sense from you, if you could expand on what Tina was talking about around the ecosystem and talk about the elements for a ripe environment for an e-reading program.
Thank you, Jackie, and hello everybody, and thank you for joining this call. Some of the things that you need to consider, or we considered, and we continue to consider in all of the programs that we design, is the environment under which this e-reading program will operate. And some of the key elements include the motivation to improve the reading skills of the target audience, whether it is students in school or patrons in a library. Creating access to books where there is scarcity. Books are very expensive, and I think that's something that is all over Africa. The cost of books can be quite prohibitive, and in itself leading to limiting of reading. We manage the cost of accessing the reading material. Digital books cost much, much less than print copies, and the logistics around delivering digital books are so much easier than delivering the print copies of the books. Then the environment has to have that urge to create a reading culture. There has to be that need for developing critical thinking skills. A lot of groups also have, I would say special interest groups, or have sort of been marginalized in one way or another, and they need mentoring. These includes, girls and persons of interest. If I may give a specific example of the UNHCR settlements, these are people of interest. They have been resettled, they've been through trauma, and they need to get back to their life as quickly as possible and as smoothly as possible. So creating that environment where there is mentorship and a feeling of safety is important. Then now, obviously, the relevant content has to be made available to the audience. In line with that, we work with local publishers, a lot of them being African publishers. When we are working in a specific country, we contact the publishers of that country so that we are able to get as local content as we can get, because then we have themes that resonate with the readers, and then that creates excitement with reading. Then when we are working with our partners, we actually ask that they have a committed implementer on the ground in the way of a project manager, somebody who values education and is actually willing to work and do what it takes to get to develop that reading culture. And I think the greatest thing would be for us is designing a program that actually works for the particular partner we are working with. In this case, when we worked with UNHCR, we had a model of empowerment. It's something we replicate for each of our projects, but again, for each of the projects, we adjust to the uniqueness of each project. This model of empowerment involves cascade training, where the project manager is identified and trained and his capacity built, and he's equipped with all of the materials that he needs to run the program. We have community engagement. We have a launch event where we invite all the community members and explain what the project is, and get the value add and the buy-in from the community. That involves inviting, of course, parents, community leaders, education officers, religious leaders, all of those stakeholders within the community that are of interest to this project. We involve them in everything that we are doing, and we build their capacity through the launches and explaining what it is we are doing. We also provide support for the project managers, so we don't sort of launch the project and then they're on their own. We have a relationship with all of our project managers. We communicate on a fairly regular basis. We communicate with them about monitoring and evaluation, and data collection and things like that, and anecdotal stories and collecting impact stories, so that there is a relationship and there is support at on the ground. Then for the project managers, we have an ongoing networking group on social media, on WhatsApp, on Gmail. So we have different platforms where our project managers can communicate with each other and be able to learn from each other. One of the critical things about a good environment for deploying this project is the actual model of deployment, and we use two models. It can either be a classroom deployment where every student has their own device, or a school library deployment where the devices are available to the community in a library setting, and different students have access to the devices based on a schedule that the project manager develops with the teachers. I think at this point, I will hand the opportunity back to Jackie so that we can continue with the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joanne. And I think you've outlined a good variety of other tools and considerations on how you really engage the community and build up sort of a network of actors or a community of practice around the use of the e-reading program, which I think has many multiple benefits, especially when we're looking at involving existing coaches within the school. We've got a question, Joanne, before we turn it over to looking at Tanzania in particular, coming from Twitter, which is, how do you promote / encourage the use with minimal internet? So when we're looking at e-reading programs, whether that be through an e-reader, through a tablet, or through a phone, when there's minimal internet, how can you still encourage and support these programs?
Thank you very much. That's actually a very good question. The e-reader is designed for offline reading, so internet would only be required at the time of pushing the books onto the devices. And once the book list is curated and you have the books on the devices, you actually don't need internet in order to access the reading material.
Wonderful. And just to give a concrete example, for some of the locations also in Tanzania, we actually worked with the team to front load a lot of the books because we weren't sure on the level of connectivity we would have. So in the interim of being able to upload and download new books, they came with a total of 63 on each e-reader, which was designed with the communities. So that's great, Joanne. Thank you. I want to try to talk to Boniface, who's a UNHCR member based in Mapenda. So he's been on the ground helping day to day within all of the schools in implementing the program. Boniface, can you hear me? All right, I think we might be experiencing some technical difficulties with getting Boniface directly on the line. So I'm going to turn this back over to Joanne first, to then be complemented by Martin, who have both been on the ground in implementing the program, both with the training and then subsequently with monitoring visits. So Joanne, when we look at implementing these programs, we've heard from the Twitter feed, you know, there's a question around minimal access to internet, but there's several other challenges that I know we've faced collectively as we implement the program on the ground. So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges?
Thank you, Jackie. I would say that one of the biggest challenges is the number of devices against the number of students. So the device to student ratio sometimes is a little off. And if I may speak about the settlement school specifically, we have 300 devices serving just under 3,000 students. These devices have been split into four, so 75 devices for each of the four schools. One school has about 430 students, and another school has over 1,000 students, and each of them has got 75 devices. So this creates a challenge around, So this creates a challenge around the number of students that can use a device at a go. For primary schools, we find that children are willing to share easily, and they can do a ratio of one device to 3 students. But for secondary school, it becomes a little bit more difficult because students are studying different subjects and things like that, and their interests may be different. They may not all want to read the same text at the same time. So that's a challenge. The second challenge we find is a local it's a sort of localized challenge in the sense that partners may want access to local content on the devices. If I use the example of Kenya, we have digitized quite a bit of the Kenya curriculum. So when Kenyan schools ask for textbooks, school textbooks, they're easily available. For our UNHCR partners, we haven't had as many Tanzania publishers come on board. We are still in the process of bringing them on board. So we have sort of limited local textbooks, although content is the same. So respiration is respiration, irrespective of who has written the book. We find that locally, people want to see their own textbooks and identify with their own textbooks. The other challenge that has been expressed to me has been the tight school schedule, which means that teachers and students have to be very creative about time management and time on task in terms of using the devices. And one of the suggestions we have given to them is that integrate the use of the devices into regular classrooms so that time on task is increased without having to necessarily look for extra time to read. The other challenge has been around charging the devices. So for the 4 settlement schools, solar energy has been provided. But on dull days and what have you, some of those, they are not able to charge all of the devices at the same time. So there are cases when the devices are not charged, which means they are not available for use until they are charged. The other challenge that has been expressed is depending on the model that is being used, some of the devices have inbuilt lights and others do not have an inbuilt light. So for the devices at the settlement schools, they don't have an inbuilt light. So in the evenings, students are limited in how much they can use them unless they have an external source of light. And in a number of these households, that one light may be needed for other activities in the family and not necessarily focused on this student for reading.
I think we've got Boniface on the line, but we're getting a lot of static. Great that you guys are able to join us from the field. If I can just ask you to mute your mic, and then I'll come to you, Boniface, right after Joanne has finished responding.
Okay, so I will continue. The other challenge is that students are socialized to read for exams. So the whole concept of reading for leisure is something that has to be introduced gently, and students motivated to read for leisure. Otherwise, the general attitude is that you study for exams. So it can create its own challenges in the sense that you might have some really rich literature to share, but the students don't really value it because they are just socialized to study for the exam. Then this challenge is very specific to Tanzania. They learn in Kiswahili for the entire primary school, and then they go to secondary school where they're learning maybe 14 subjects at the beginning before they select the subject, and all of a sudden they're learning everything in English. The switch from Kiswahili to English can be challenging and they can struggle with it. So it requires a lot of creativity and outreach and extra activities to get them to be confident enough to, to be excited about discovering these new books that are all written in English. I think Boniface can take it up from there.
Great. So Boniface, we turn it over to you. Do you want to expand on any of the other challenges that you've seen in the field? Oh, we can't hear you, Boniface. I can see you. If you might have to turn your mic up a bit. All right, well, we work out how to get you online so you can participate. I'm going to turn it over to Martin to see if you want to expand, given your time in the field, in the refugee settlements, but also more broadly. What are some of the most persistent challenges that you've seen? Martin, you've got to take your microphone off mute also if you can contribute. All right, I think technical difficulties across the board. Tina, any further challenges that you'd like to expand on?
No, I think Joanne has covered the challenges very well. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Well, from my side also, and being on the ground and in the field, I can say that one of the things that's been the most remarkable is, despite the challenges that we encounter, really seeing how the community responds and how they're able to adapt to the situations and come up with their own solutions, to really see how, from whether it's the challenge of solar and being able to power all of the devices, and they've got a really effective sort of mechanism for regulating how they charge the different devices and how they share them across the classrooms, to, as Joanne mentioned, really stimulating that understanding of how you can use resources as supplementary material within a class, even if they're coming from a different country. It's been great to sort of work with the teachers and work with the communities to see how we can really respond and expand these programs. So building on that, I want to expand a little bit more in looking at some of the successes around e-reader programs, and particularly looking at the settlements that we've been working at and within Tanzania. So Joanne, I'm going to go to you first. I know you recently completed a monitoring visit to Tanzania, and I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the refugee communities and the lessons learned and successes from implementing the program there.
Thank you, Jackie, for the question. It's been very interesting and exciting working with the communities in the settlements, and we do have a lot of successes to report, and we do measure these successes. So like I mentioned earlier, these programs have inbuilt monitoring and evaluation activities so that we are sort of tracking. We are tracking what is going on and what kind of impact we are having. We generally started with a baseline survey to determine what the starting point was for each of these students, so that in that way we were able to offer the right intervention. And through that model of empowerment that I talked about, we asked the teachers to start with simpler texts, because these were students that were more comfortable reading in Kiswahili than English. So to start with simpler texts in order to motivate students to enjoy reading. And I have observed that, I have seen it, and the teachers have reported it to us through the performance, through the writing of comprehension and composition and debating and things like that. So when we're doing our M&E, or when we are working with our partners and they are doing it at the ground, we have some surveys that they conduct on a regular basis. And one of them would be a device survey, where they are checking to see, first of all, how many devices are borrowed, for example, in a week. So how many devices borrowed and in what amount of time? How many in a day? How many in a week? How many in a month? Who borrows the devices? Is it more of girls or is it more of boys? Is the gender ratio balanced? And I must compliment the UNHCR, the 4 settlement schools, that it was more or less balanced. Boys and girls were borrowing just as much as each other. The girls were a little shy about, standing up and actually confirming that they had been borrowing. But when they were separated from the boys, they were able to confirm that they were borrowing the devices, and the project managers also confirmed it. It is important to understand that the cultural setting in which these children grow up does not encourage very much, women to stand up in public and speak. So to address that, there are times when there is need to, have the girls on their own, and they can actually share their experiences with the devices and with reading and what they are doing. And for us, that is great, because it means girls are borrowing just as much as the boys. One of the things we have success with is checking. What are students reading? Is it curriculum books? Is it leisure books? In what languages are they reading? Is it more of English? Is it more of Kiswahili? And through the course of time, are they reading more of the English, which they're not as comfortable with, or are they reading more of the Kiswahili? And the results suggest that they're reading more of English now, still more comfortable in Kiswahili as it's their first language, but reading more of English. Then the teachers get to review the test scores. The baseline survey was done at the beginning. The teachers review the test scores either at midterm or end of term, but at least 2-3 times a year, the teachers are able to compare. The project managers compare the performance of these students to see the gains that they are making. Some of the anecdotal ones are like, increased participation in classroom. Students actually standing up and speaking up. Confidence in language skills, spoken skills, a lot of new vocabulary words are being spoken, and that can be attributed directly to the built-in dictionary on the devices. So when they come across a word that they don't understand, they don't need to ask anybody. They can see the dictionary and see the meaning of the word, and then they're encouraged to use it even when they speak. Then that emerging reading culture, we have had parents tell us things like, my son would rather stay home, or my daughter would rather stay home and read just a little bit more than watch TV, and that is significant. We also have students participating in a lot of debates, and for us that is very exciting, because it directly suggests that these students are thinking critically about concepts that are thrown at them, ideas that are thrown at them, and they can be able to to support their argument. So that, for us, that is a major success. Then I also wanted to talk about a little bit about the slide that you can see there. These are studies that we made with younger students, but the nature of our models is that it can be replicated using the right content for their target age. And we found that children make twice the progress reading words correctly when they have e-readers. Girls outpace their peers, and this was a study that was done in Ghana. The girls outpace the peers, and I think Tina mentioned it earlier, where when girls are given opportunities to read, they actually read more than the boys. And in Kenya, we also had a pilot research taking place. It was for a program called Primary Math and Reading program, where between January and November 2013, our 7, 8, 9-year-old students read an average of 17 storybooks. Now, this may not look like a lot in certain contexts, but in the context of these students where they have no textbooks whatsoever, the only book they ever see is the one that the teacher has. If they're lucky, they have a few textbooks, and possibly in their home they may have a Bible, but that's the only book they ever read. So in a span of about 10, 11 months, for a student to read and complete 17 storybooks, that is actually significant. I think I can hand the mic over now to Martin.
Great. Well, yes, let's open it up to Martin, to Tina, to Christina, who's also joining from Worldreader. If you'd like to complement with any of the other sort of successes and lessons learned from the programs.
Yeah, I would like to jump in. I would say that Joanne gave a really good summary of how we measure success, and kind of at a high level, it really comes down to, well, first is number of people reached, and Joanne discussed kind of how we gather that data, but then more importantly, we consider it at a high level, whether the students are reading more and reading better to lead to literacy, to learning outcomes. And so based on each project, each setting that we're in, we generally go in kind of aligning our M&E framework, our monitoring evaluation framework, with kind of the objectives of the program. If it's a library project, we may focus a little bit more on access, for example, and when it's a student-based learning environment like a classroom, then we would use tools like the reading assessment tool to actually assess, the improvement in oral comprehension, in oral fluency, as well as reading comprehension. And then more qualitatively, there's also, I think there's a lot of side benefits that we consider successes, but we'll continue to figure out how to really measure it. Would be things like confidence through using ICT tools, and confidence through having read more and having a tool where I think a lot of students, I think Joanne mentioned this as well, they have a dictionary at their disposal, they have all this reading content at their disposal, and they spend time reading it, and they gain a lot of confidence through that. And also because they're able to, they may be able to speak English better as a result of that. And so that qualitatively, we also know there's a lot in terms of student reading and even parents engagement. That's also another very important piece. And then in terms of the successes and lessons learned, I think all of this knowledge from Joanne, Martin, Boniface, and Jackie that we kind of collected on the ground help us so much to continue to improve. Really, we know that nothing, there's a lot of room for improvement, and we take all of these learnings and challenges and then figure out, how do we, if there's the content still they really want to access content from their own publishers, and we take that and we know that that's an action item for us to figure out how to do that. With that, I think we would love to hear from Martin and Boniface if wondering if the technical difficulties have been resolved on their end.
Well, pause for a moment and I'll invite Martin and Boniface. If you guys are able to join the conversation, please do. But I do think both Tina and Joanne, what you brought up around the psychosocial impact of these programs, I think is also so important. As Joanne cleanly articulated sort of the context in which these environments are set, where often there's so few resources for learning and particularly for engagement. I mean, these aren't children who grow up reading stories. There's an oral culture to storytelling, but actually being able to read and embrace the pleasure of reading a whole range of different books and not just a textbook goes a long way. And when we were there on the ground just starting the program, time and time again, students would come up to us and talk about the difference that the program made in making them feel that they weren't being left behind. And that Worldreader, UNHCR, and more generally the global community hadn't forgotten them, and that through these tools and through the mixture of social media tools that they could actually stay up to date and get access to a variety of content from around the world. So I think that has done a world of difference, not only in building their confidence, but also establishing a lot of hope and enthusiasm for education moving forward. I don't think the technical difficulties have been resolved, and I apologize to our audience for that, because I think both Boniface and Martin have some terrific stories of their experience on the ground, and it's really been a delight from our side that we've had such a strong team to help support the program throughout the process. I want to go now, knowing that we don't have too much time left, to another question, and just a reminder out to anyone watching, if you do have questions, please send them along. If you tweet them, use the hashtag eLearning and we'll make sure we address them. But the next question we have is, what are the additional opportunities that we see around innovating in education? And I want to frame this particularly around looking at the refugee context. So I'm going to switch up the order a little bit, and I'll go first to you, Tina, and then we'll see who else would like to contribute.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I want to start off by touching back on the ecosystem approach I was talking about. So I want to preface it by saying that in terms of other opportunities and innovation, it's really about collaborating with the people on both the people that are using the digital reading as well as the others who are managing these projects on the ground. So those are the people who know best, and we try to work very, very closely that way. And through both kind of exchange conversations and reporting, but also the what Joanne talked about, we have a lot of capacity building activities and refresher trainings for the project managers. We stay in touch with them. We have the Digital Reading Summit annually, where we are not really just sharing with them how to gain new skills, but also really using the opportunity to get feedback from them so that we can continue to improve. And more specifically, to answer your question, the additional opportunities we see, especially in the refugee context, are they're actually quite a lot. I would say that, and they range in there's a variety. One is that I mentioned earlier that we have an application available on the mobile phone. It's really more than one application. Basically, any phone you have, you own, whether it's a basic feature phone or it's a smartphone of some kind, you can read, access information, Worldreader mobile application and just start reading, critical health information, reference information, how to build a resume. And we also have readers for children or for parents to read to children. That we see as a very great tool that we really want to explore how to apply to the refugee context. Like I said earlier, especially for community members that are not necessarily in the classrooms with access to the e-readers, or maybe are not have access to these community hubs where we may place e-readers, especially in the home setting or in the community setting. I think there's we see that this tool, using the phone, we can help disseminate critical health information for mothers or parents and things like that. So that we want to explore as an additional tool in this setting. We also know that we are not the only education technology institution that works in these settings. There's a lot of other or great organizations that are already providing technology, maybe in the form of tablets or computers or things like that. And for us, one of the things that Worldreader offers is really the relevant content, where we've partnered with many African publishers to digitize their curriculum textbooks, as well as storybooks that are written by African authors. So we are also really looking at how to effectively supply the digital content to existing technology, that if there's already hardware and devices available that can receive these books, and students and teachers can start reading, that's a great opportunity. And then in the future, we also want to see how tools like phones and maybe other applications that we can use on tablets that could better enhance basically opportunities for teachers to achieve their own objectives in their classrooms through other technologies. It could be an application that has interactive capabilities that teachers can apply quizzes, give quizzes to students, and could kind of assess using technology how the students are performing or reading. Students can learn through doing maybe interactive learning games on technology. I would say that's more kind of down the road, in 2 to 3 years time. But those are the things that we're also actively thinking about and exploring. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I know from our side at UNHCR and UNHCR Innovation, we're really excited at looking at how we can expand, also in combination with some of our work with Vodafone Foundation and the Instant Network School programs. And just as you said, Tina, looking at the variety of tools that communities have already or that programs are working with, and see how we can combine efforts and really make use of the digital content and the approach that Worldreader has, which is so strong with the communities. That's going to take us towards the end of our Hangout. But before we go, I just want to thank all of the experts that we have joining us, and apologize for those who weren't able to connect via voice. I'd also like to thank all of you who are watching this Hangout on innovating education through e-reading programs. And if you'd like to see more of Worldreader's work, we're going to tweet right now some of the videos that they have from at UNHCR Innovation. So we really encourage you to check out the Worldreader website and also to follow these video links to learn more about the programs. Now, before we make our official goodbyes, I'd just like to hand it over to the panelists in case you'd like to make any last words. So first to Joanne.
Thank you, Jackie. Just pulling up those photos reminds me that there are many ways in which empowerment can happen, and I think that is an opportunity within this area of innovating education. As you can see there in one of the photos, we have the solar solution, and that is made available to partners who are off the grid and they don't have to worry about electricity. Similar to the question somebody asked about internet, you can do offline reading, you can use solar. So the idea is you will still get to the content. Then we have a picture that is showing a teacher training on the use of the devices in the classroom, supporting students, part of the empowerment. We have a picture showing a group of people who attended the last year's community conference, where we brought together all of the players, from the content developers to the project managers to the people funding the education to the people doing courier services, and each of them had an opportunity to discuss the relationship and their relationship to how the project works. This other one, I think, is just a capacity building initiative where people come together and share ideas. And the final photo on the right, bottom right, shows a group of teachers who have just been trained, so that when Worldreader steps out of that equation, when we take a step back, the project can be able to run successfully. And if anybody has any questions, I think like Jackie has said, just visit the website and you can be able to get in touch with us and we can answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joanne. And I think bringing it back to the communities and the photos and the examples of all the excellent work you guys have been doing, I think really helps to summarize the importance of these programs on the ground. Tina, any last words?
Yeah, I want to close by saying that, we are inspired on a regular basis, especially by the students who, read these books on our e-readers. We have Okanta Cade, who in our Ghana program that have already graduated. She was in our program for about 4 years in a school, and she didn't know that Ghanaians could be writers before she read the books on the e-readers, and she started submitting a lot of writing that we have actually published for her since, as she aspired to be a writer after reading Ghanaian content. We have Nancy, who now aspires to be a nurse after reading some of the reading materials that have medical information. We have students who say they want to become pilots because they've known more about the world, and so our work is really energized by these students who have new confidence and aspirations, and we see that Worldreader is working alongside them on a regular basis. And also thank you very, very much UNHCR for hosting this and for giving our Worldreader the opportunity to share more with the community about innovations in education. And thank you, Jackie and Corinne, for facilitating and coordinating this with us.
Wonderful. Well, once again, thank you to all of the experts and to those who weren't able to contribute, and for all of you for watching. These programs are really making a big impact on the ground, and this is just the start. This is sort of the first year of the full implementation program of the work in Mapenda and Mashamo, and we're excited to see where this takes us. So as Tina mentioned, for that being future refugee writers out there that want to contribute books to the general community. If you'd like to learn more, visit the websites. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope everyone has a lovely day. Thank you. Goodbye.